everyone, and welcome back for another AI news show where myself and Kevin Kieller will be digging into some of the latest news headlines. And we'll also be talking to Gepp Singal, who's the president of AI strategy at Qualtrics. And we'll be talking to him about the opportunities in AI as he sees them. And he's a big hitter, so it's going to be really interesting. Watch out for that. He's got a great history. But Kevin, you know Gepp a little bit more than I, but looking forward to having him on the show today.
Yeah, no, I was super excited when Gepp made the time to be on the show. So, let's go through the news so we can get to what I think will be a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, first of all, and it hit the newswire this week, I think, it was a Gartner story that they released a new report predicting that by 2027, 40% of generative AI solutions will be multimodal, integrating text, image, audio, and video data, which seems to be a significant leap from just the 1% in 2023. So I was keen to hear from you, Kevin. What's your take on this story and how important is this?
Well, I think it makes total sense. I think as noted by the article, models that are trained on more than one modality help capture that relationship between the different streams of data. Historically, everything whether it was audio did speech to text, and then it was always just the text. And so you lose all the nuances, whatever people say, 80% of communication is nonverbal. So I think that this totally makes sense. I thought that there was a good kind of quote from the article, which I'm going to read, which says, navigating the Gen AI ecosystem will continue to be overwhelming for enterprises due to the chaotic and fast-moving ecosystem of technology and vendors. That was from a distinguished analyst at Gartner in this article. And when I read that, I was hoping, Rob, that in a very small way with this show, we're helping to, basically decode some of the complexity that people are finding. And of course, with the new AItoday.com site, which has just launched. So there you go.
Well, thanks for the plug. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will drop a link to this article in the description below because it's interesting and it's got Gartner's hype cycle in there, and you can see whereabouts generative AI is on that. And it looks like it could be on that other side, that slippery slope into the trough of disillusionment, Kevin. But more to come on that. I'm sure we're going to be talking about that with Gepp as well. But interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I think, Rob, they also say that they think Gen AI will reach mainstream in 10 years. I actually think it's going to get there, faster, right? And they do point out that, industry-specific models and maybe some, AI agents where they're able to perform tasks, that's really what's going to bring it into to mainstream. 100% agree with the industry-specific models. I think AI agents, where they're performing tasks on your behalf, I think that might take a little longer because if they get something wrong, there's more consequences when they're booking airfare and expensive hotels for you that you didn't intend.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really exciting. And this multimodal thing is really interesting because as video becomes more kind of, I suppose, available to us. I know, OpenAI are working on Sora, aren't they? And we've seen previews of that capability, and we've seen various other platforms show us what they can do with AI-generated video. I mean, I don't think we've really fully understood the potential there with AI-generated video, but it could be pretty interesting in the enterprise nonetheless. So keen to discuss that, but I could go down a rabbit hole all day long on that one. But anyway, next up, the next story I found was... I don't know. It feels like something from maybe the 90s or the 2000s, where we had processor wars and everyone was competing. But we seem to have chip wars on at the moment, AI chip wars. And I found this story on Tech Radar quite interesting about Cerebras Systems' latest AI inference chip, which is being positioned as the major competitor to Nvidia's DGX 100. So this chip is boasting almost 1 million cores and 44 gigabyte of high-speed memory, which is kind of blowing my brains already. But it can handle really, really large AI models with billions and trillions of parameters. So I mean, it does blow my mind a little bit, this, Kevin. It is a well outside of my kind of wheelhouse. But why is this important to the industry and to the adoption of AI, that these chips can continue to evolve and get faster?
Yeah, well, so I think, NVIDIA is clearly the leading AI chip revolution, kind of leading the AI chip revolution. And it has somewhere between 70 and 95% of the market, depending on who's counting, how you count. But, there are these competitors, and in summary, I think competition is good. AMD has the MI 325 chip, Intel has Gaudi 3 and Lunar Lake, Amazon has some custom chips, Titanium and Inferentia or whatever, and Google has TPUs. I think with the Cerebras, as you said, they call it the WSE3. They're claiming that it's the fastest AI processor on Earth. And as you said, for those who love specs, I mean, 900,000 cores and 44 gigabytes of on-chip memory and a memory bandwidth of 21 petabytes per second. I mean, super impressive. I think the competition is good because it just, opens up additional capabilities, because training these large language models, takes whatever horsepower you can throw at it. So exciting to see, Cerebras bring out this chip.
Yeah, and you're right. You're absolutely right. And I am imagining we're only scratching the surface of like that computer, the motor movement, anyway. So we're going to more likely need a lot more chips and a lot more power, I suppose, and performance going forward as the adoption of AI continues. So interesting stuff. My last story that I wanted to talk about was we've all known about this for a while, but Amazon's investment in the AI company Anthropic, which that investment's now happened, is $4 billion. And it effectively, Anthropic is like the safe version of ChatGPT, and it's got this platform called Claude. But this partnership between Amazon and Anthropic is really interesting. And do you kind of see that similar to Microsoft's investment in OpenAI? And how crucial do you think this is to the future of Amazon's generative AI strategy?
Yeah, well, maybe we should, at some point, we'll ask Gurdeep about this, because I know he's got the background there. But, so as you said, Amazon last September invested like 1.25 billion, and then later this year, 2.75 billion, bringing up their total investment in Anthropic to 4 billion. I think we're going to continue to see the big get bigger. As you said, Claude 3 and the Claude 3 Opus model that Anthropic has, they say they outperform OpenAI's ChatGPT 4 model in certain areas. But we're also seeing, according to the Wall Street Journal, Apple and Nvidia are considering a multi-billion new funding round for OpenAI, and Microsoft is also going to participate. So I think we're going to see, large companies continue to invest in one or more of these leading models. But once again, I like this because competition is good for all of us, end users, and also the vendors who are, figuring out how they can add this AI capability to their product set.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we're going to see even more investments going forward, but it's an interesting industry to watch right now. I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit more from Gurdeep, but for right now, it's time for our AI Minute. Kevin, where are we going this week? What phrase or kind of word are we digging into?
Yeah, so Rob, I'm going to talk today about emergent ability. So what is an emergent ability? Well, in biology, it's the idea that these lifeless cells, if you get enough of them, they can come together and life gets created. Biologists don't understand how that works. And similarly, with large language models, as they get bigger, as they scale up, there's unexpected behaviors that large language models exhibit, and these are called emergent abilities. They are abilities that large language models can perform that they were not explicitly trained to do. And so if we take a look at a few examples, depending on the model, the ability to perform multi-step arithmetic, certain models demonstrate this emergent ability, even though they weren't trained to do that. The ability to summarize, or certain models exhibit coding capabilities where they weren't really trained for that. And what I think is exciting about this, is some fun facts. Researchers don't understand exactly why this happens or at what size. There's a lot of research figuring when you go from a small language model and where is that border where a large language model, and there's research, around that because they're trying to understand that. And I think the most exciting thing, and maybe it's powered by this investments that we talked about in the models or these new chipsets, it's unclear and quite frankly quite exciting of what abilities might emerge as these large language models scale upward and become even larger. So that's emergent abilities, exciting and, just amazing, quite frankly.
Thanks, Kevin. That is really interesting, actually. That is cool. Well, whatever possibilities could come from that. But that's really interesting. Well, anyways, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Gepp Singal, who's the president of AI strategy at Qualtrics. Gepp, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hi, Rob. Great to be here. It's going well.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we're both really excited to have you on today and to dig into kind of maybe some of your backgrounds and kind of bring us up to speed in terms of what you're doing. But I'd love to hear a little bit. Why don't we start there? I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. I looked at your LinkedIn page today. It was 33 years at Microsoft. Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us more. Tell us more about your background.
Well, I was very lucky. I sort of stumbled upon sort of the candy store, right when I graduated from graduate school. And I came to work at Microsoft. And my first chapter, if you will, was really in operating systems and networking. So I happened to be at the right place at the right time when the TCP/IP stack was being built in 1993. And then that went on to, of course, the whole internet really taking off in 95. So I got to, write a lot of the code there, do some fun inventions while we were there. And then, all the way until Windows XP, where we shipped with Wi-Fi for the first time in a general purpose operating system, which we take for granted. I mean, it was in 2001, when we shipped it, it was a really, really difficult project because even the chips and the protocols were not actually standardized by then. Then I moved on to work on communications. I started Microsoft's communications business and, had 2 stints in it. The first stint, I got into Link 2010. And then at that point, I was like, hey, I think I'm done with comms. So, at that time, Steve Ballmer was the CEO, and I told Steve, and Steve says, well, okay, but first help me, buy Skype. So I did finish the acquisition of Skype, and then I had to decide what I was going to do next. And I moved on to the first AI platform at Microsoft. And this was in 2011, so just before deep learning had sort of kicked in. And we were doing some very interesting things. So the first Cortana was built on the platform that my team worked on. And during this time, I also was managing Microsoft Speech, some of the computer vision work, some of the work which eventually went into HoloLens, Bing Maps. So I was working on a bunch of things which are either playing with AI or enable AI as a enabling technology. And then, so I was really enjoying that. And then Steve Ballmer comes back to me and says that we want you to go back and run Skype, Link, and really get going on what became Teams now. So I went back for my second stint to do that for about 3 years. And then I came right back to AI. So I then came the last 7 years at Microsoft, I was working on Emergent AI and very specifically focused on looking at new kind of business opportunities, value creation with Emergent AI as part of the Microsoft research team. So that's what I was doing. And then I, retired in 2023, September. It didn't last too long because some of my old colleagues who were at Qualtrics, wanted to pull me in to work on AI. And, given that the point I left Microsoft, we were like at this sort of cusp of such an amazing, wave of technology, which we'll talk more about. So that was always like, that's an interesting time for me to retire. So this opportunity really gave me a really good place to work with people, great people that I'd worked with before on some amazing technology, and very specifically in the context of what Qualtrics does. So that's sort of my journey.
Thanks, Gurdeep. That's really interesting. You got such a great background, and I'd love to catch up separately and hear some of those stories from back in the day. So we're going to hand over to Kevin now. Kevin, do you want to jump in there with our first question for Gurdeep?
Yeah, no, absolutely fascinating background, as you say, Rob. So Gurdeep, how are you thinking about AI specifically at Qualtrics, and more broadly, for your customers, like what opportunities do you see AI opening up for them?
Well, if you take a step back and see what is really happening with AI, we are seeing a shift from deterministic program systems towards probabilistic learning systems. And this is such a shift. We have not seen shifts like this since the mechanical computers to electronic computers, to the advent of programming languages, to graphical user interface, to the internet. I mean, this is a shift at that scale. So you have to think about it with that lens. Otherwise, you'll just think about AI as a feature. Okay? So you got to take a step back and say, what fundamentally transforms? There's some really amazing stories, like if you look at these different transitions I mentioned. When the first graphical user interfaces came out, what did people do? They created a window and they gave you a chat, typing interface, things like that. Because they thought, oh, great, I can have many of these typing interfaces inside because it's a windowing system. But that was the wrong way to think about it, right? You really had to step back and say, wow, graphical user interfaces give me a completely new metaphor in which I can, interact with the user. Similarly, AI, this shift from deterministic program systems to probabilistic learning systems is going to fundamentally change the interface between the human and the machine. The previous paradigm was that the machine is dumb and the human is smart. So put every interaction on rails. So you look at an application and it's got a very clear information architecture, and it's got this function, it's got this workflow, and that's all. Because guess what? The machine is really dumb, so you have to input things exactly correctly. This model is being inverted. Now the machine is actually very, very smart. I'm not saying the human is dumb. The machine is very smart. So the machine says you can express what you want to do at the highest level in using all kinds of artifacts, and we can make sense of it. So, when you look at that, you look at, okay, so what's going to happen to apps and websites and business logic and customer support? You look at all these things, and, they're going to get completely upended. So, Qualtrics today is in the business of experience management. So what does that mean? It helps businesses really, really measure in a very, not sort of a guesstimate sort of way, but in a very, very clear, direct way of what is actually happening on their plant. Wherever customers are interacting or employees are interacting, they measure. And what do? They get all that data, organize that data, provide all kinds of analytics so that humans, analysts, CMOs, CHROs can look at the data and then they can turn some knobs. Right? This is kind of the business that Qualtrics is in. And it's a very valuable business. This is like all churn, upsell, all those things get driven by these sort of things. Right? So it's a pretty valuable piece of it. What happened in this world of, where these websites and apps and all these things go away? Well, we're going to go into the agentic future. And if you go to the agentic future, the role of Qualtrics also changes. So that is kind of the perspective with which, I'm looking at AI in the context of Qualtrics, and our customers who are starting to sort of see this new picture, I'd say, okay, what are the implications of all this for us, and how can Qualtrics come and help us with this, and where do they fit in, etc. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Gurdeep. Thanks for that. And we were talking about earlier some news items there. I mean, first of all, lots of chips out there, and they're all getting better. You know, it's like going back in the day when the first processors were coming out, and there's, lots of competition there. But obviously now we're seeing these huge investments, aren't we? Billions of dollars being poured into AI. So I was keen to kind of ask you, because you're really kind of in the mix of, right on the coalface of this, but is AI going to see a cold winter? We're seeing, we are hearing more and more about this AI being overhyped. We talked about the Gartner article earlier, talking, about modalities and that kind of thing. But ultimately, they were talking about that there's possibly a trough of disillusionment coming for generative AI. But, what's your take on this? Where do you think the industry's going this year and next?
Well, my entire career has been leaning into the future. When we were working on communications, I co-authored the first VPN in the world. That is a time when people were saying that, oh, you can't really do security on the internet. It's too crazy and wild, right? When the cloud came out, don't put your data up in the cloud. Now, if your data is not in the cloud, it's probably very vulnerable. So, I have literally communications. Kevin knows this. We started talking about unified communications and that these PBXs don't make sense and all that. And everybody's looking at us, well, you guys are crazy. And, Gartner's drawing troughs of disillusionment of unified communication. I mean, all that means nothing to me. I think that is a very, very short-term kind of a blip and people get, did the internet stop because, we had a big recession in 2000, 2001? Because Global Crossing went bankrupt, did the internet and the world stop? No, it didn't. It was a very minor blip in a much big journey, in a huge journey. And I think that's what we're seeing with AI. The thing with AI is not new, as many of you know. It's really about, Gen AI has really brought it to the point where the tipping point for AI has happened. And this is a tipping point where some of us who've been working on for a long time, we have been waiting for a long time. So this is a one-way door. We are not going back. There may be, periods where some of the investments are going to be a little ahead of the revenue, but that's okay. These things happen in all the waves that I have seen. But this is a secular trend. This is not going back. And I think that the pace of it is going to surprise people. The thing we have to see, if you look at different transitions I had mentioned earlier, they took a while to set in, but the rate of change, kept picking up. And today, I think with AI, we will surprise everybody just in the pace at which this is going to really become, broadly adopted.
Yeah, no, you sound more optimistic and or hopeful like me. And, because I think it's less, I often say, it's less a trough of disillusionment, and I call it the canyon of confusion. I think there's lots of opportunities for people to use Gen AI incorrectly and then be disappointed with the results. So, from your perspective, like looking at Qualtrics internally, but also externally, what would you say customers should be doing to leverage the opportunities and not kind of fall into this disappointment?
I think the first thing I would say is that everybody should be experimenting with AI to a very, very high degree. Because, AI is not a feature. AI is a mindset. It is a culture. It is a practice. It is new kind of products. It's new kinds of tools. And frankly, it's a new kind of talent. And now, not everybody is going to be building new algorithms. Okay, so not everybody needs to do that. But then everybody just can't be sitting at the end of a prompt either, and then saying tell me I wonder what this machine does, right? You have to be able to get past that and get into this what I call the middle zone, which is past the prompts, but maybe just short the models. Every enterprise which has a team, firstly, they should have an AI team. They should be fine-tuning. They should be optimizing. They should be looking at applying it to different business problems that they have and measuring and seeing where their things are today and how they get better every month or every 3 months. This is probably the most important thing any business ought to be doing today. And if they're not doing that, if they're reading, Gartner reports, other reports, and saying, well, I think the draft is coming and I'm going to just sit back, this is going to be too late. Because you know what? Let's pick a date. Let's say it's going to all, in 3 years, this is really going to take off. But guess what? It's going to take off for companies that started working on it 3 years before. And there's no going to be coming back and catching the train while it's going at 100 miles an hour. That's not going to happen. So everybody has to get in, and everybody has to really start developing their own intuition, their own sense, start developing the talent, start developing the practice, start learning the tools, and riding the efficient wave that AI is on right now.
It's interesting you say that organizations should effectively be early adopters, get on the train now rather than wait till it's plug and play later on when it's too late to differentiate your organization and innovate. And I totally get that. I'm totally bought into that. But for the early adopters, there's challenges, aren't there? There's a lot of things going, not going so well in AI right now. And obviously the media are covering a lot of a lot of those issues around AI. What do you think are the biggest ones that organizations need to overcome, Gurdeep, with AI? What rocks do they need to move?
Yeah, every business has their unique problems that are maybe uniquely important to them or uniquely important to the industry, but they know what those problems are. Like for example, I managed Microsoft Speech before deep learning models came out, hidden Markov models and those kind of things. And, we were able to only get to a certain level of performance in speech. That is why all the agents, sucked, right? I mean, Siri sucked, Cortana sucked. Like, because why? Because we were not able to get speech record to the point that it was sort of acceptable level. So at that point, trying to do too much with speech would have been a problem, right? So you had to wait for some sort of a science breakthrough to fix that. But that doesn't mean that speech record has no value at all, even at that point, right? You could do offline transcription, and you could provide, human assistance in transcription and human assistance in translation. So you have to find for your particular business where AI can sufficiently solve the problem and then use it appropriately. Yeah, today, I would have no problem recommending people to heavily lean into speech recognition. Now, does that help everywhere? No. Maybe it'll help in accessibility. Maybe it'll help in, offline, training, etc. So, this is finding that sweet spot. So one thing I should clarify is that there are two things. One is how prepared an enterprise is internally to take on AI. That is where the talent, the practice, the comfort, the knowledge, all that comes in. Then there is how much AI is actually in their customer-facing solutions today. Okay? So the first is absolutely mandatory. This is not a fad. This is not going away. This is the future. The second is where, depending on the risk profile, depending on the kind of problems that are there, kind of how much, is where they should decide when and how much, etc. that you sort of dial that in. Like, for example, one thing I've seen now, which is, I'm glad to see it, right? Like we've seen, okay, so you have a website and now you're starting to see these assistants that are talking onto, the main website. Like what's happening there, right? You're saying that I'm going to start getting people comfortable and not everybody will opt in. In fact, 10, 20% will opt in, but they comfortable that they can go and start expressing themselves in this very open-ended natural language way, as opposed to being restricted to the information architecture that the website is sort of presenting to them. And that's a very, I would say easy way to start. Now, does that mean that won't be exploited? I mean, there are a lot of jailbreaks and stuff happen. Well, that's where you learn hardening. When we shipped PBTP, the first VPN in the world, we had this big security analysis. Oh, the crypto is all wrong and all that. It took me 3 weeks to fix the crypto. We hit the 25th anniversary of the invention of the VPN, and I was interviewed. Until a couple of years ago, PBTP was the single biggest VPN protocol which is used in the world. I mean, there is no count in how many billions of VPN connections have been made in that period. So the minor glitch is something that you can work around. And you know, if you're hitting into hallucinations, if you're hitting into jailbreaks, guess what? We're all learning together, and we will fix it. We're not going to stop and sort of go back.
Yeah, no, just fascinating insights, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to be here. Lastly, I mean, and you talked about this already, but I just want to drill down and ask you to kind of take out your magical crystal ball. How quickly do you see AI becoming really the competitive advantage for most businesses and maybe even countries as we move forward? You threw out 3 years, but is it, what's your comfort level? Is it 3 years, 2 years, 5 years? Like, how do you see this playing out?
Here's my view on this, right? Like when mobile devices came along, it was imperative that people get a new mobile app going, because more and more the customers over time, as they got smartphones, were going to be, using mobile. Does it mean that, websites went away, portals, etc.? No, that didn't mean that. It meant that there was this new paradigm taking on in addition to the old paradigm. But guess what? World's attention was on mobile. So it doesn't matter if it is 100% adopted. People are still watching and seeing, are you leaning into this new paradigm? Because that's where the discussion is. I mean, there's still a lot of world systems run COBOL today. Does anybody talk about COBOL? Nobody talks about COBOL. Everybody's talking about the new emergent paradigm. And I think this mindset is really important. My personal view is that I think in 3 years from now, every app will have elements of AI, and there'll be varying degrees of. And if you are sitting on the side of, I'm not adding AI because it has all these potential laundry list of problems, whether they apply to you or not, you are going to be irrelevant in this new world. And that is sort of, is it 3 years, is it 2.5 years, is it 3.5 years? I don't know, but it is not too far away. There's this old thing, right? Humans overestimate what happened in 3 years and underestimate what happens in 10 years. And, this very well may apply to that. But again, 3 years from now, there won't be anybody sitting and saying, well, I'm sticking to classical computers and, the old flow, old program systems because, AI has all these problems.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. But Kevin and Gurdeep, I mean, it's great talking to you both. I mean, certainly Gurdeep, it's really insightful what you've told us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Great, Rob. Great to be here. Kevin, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for watching our AI show. If you've got some good takeaways from today's session, do give us a quick mention on social, and you can connect with Kevin and myself on LinkedIn, and our links are in the description. I'm Rob Scott from UC Today. Thanks for watching.